Welcome back to America's Forum. I'm J.D. Hayworth.
And I'm John Bachman. We were talking about tax policy, J.D. Let's switch it up a little bit and talk about what more people, I think, are dealing with today, especially considering there's all those weather delays in the Northeast.
A little bit of green, and we're not talking money in your pocket or going to the feds. We're talking St. Patrick's Day, a cultural and religious holiday celebrated annually on March 17th, the death date of the patron saint of Ireland, St. Patrick. The day was made an official Christian feast day in the early 17th century and commemorates St. Patrick and the arrival of Christianity in Ireland. Celebrations generally involve public parades and festivals and the wearing of green attire or shamrocks. The Lenten restrictions on eating and drinking alcohol lifted for the day, which has encouraged and propagated the holiday's tradition of alcohol consumption. I'll drink to that. Oh, not while I'm at work.
After the show, Jay.
That's right, after the show. We're joined now by history professor Ed O'Connell of Holy Cross College. Ed, thanks very much for joining us today on America's Forum.
Very glad to be here. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
And to you too, sir. And Ed, with your help, it's time for us as a public service to dispel some of the, I guess, popular beliefs and misconceptions surrounding this holiday. And let's begin with number one from your article. St. Patrick was Irish.
Yeah, there should be a question mark on the end of that, right? He actually wasn't Irish. He was born in what we would now consider to be southwestern England, which, of course, for a lot of Irish people rubs them a little bit the wrong way. But, you know, if you go back to the early 3rd, 4th, 5th century in Europe, what we consider countries and nations, those ideas didn't really exist. So St. Patrick was really what we'd call a Celtic Briton, you know, person from that larger Celtic world, which was somewhat indistinguishable between Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales.
Number two, St. Patrick was the first Christian missionary to Ireland.
Right. I mean, he's the patron saint of Ireland, so you would naturally think that he was the guy that brought Christianity. He's sometimes depicted that way, but he's, as best historians can tell, he probably's not the first. He's definitely the first one to really become, you know, phenomenally successful. So there were a few people that preceded him, but nobody that had the kind of major impact that he did. So he's properly considered the patron saint, the one who sort of really brought Christianity and got the momentum towards an island-wide conversion to Christianity. He's the guy that got that going.
Well, Professor, tell us about the shamrocks here. Is this true that this is what St. Patrick used to help teach the Irish about Christianity, kind of a symbol of a cross?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I learned when I was, you know, in grade school. But turns out that it may be true, but we don't know if he used it to explain the Trinity because there's no, you know, written record, none of his writings, of which we have quite a few actually, and nothing from contemporaries saying that that's what he did. So as best people can figure out, either he did and didn't write it down, or other Christian missionaries pretty quickly figured out that the shamrock, you know, is perfect, convenient symbol to sort of show the idea of the Trinity, that something can have three parts, but those parts are unified.
Interesting. All right, moving on. And the other myth we hear so much about St. Patrick is that he drove all the snakes out of Ireland. Where did that originate?
Yeah, it's not clear where that one originated, but as somebody once, when the first time somebody told me this, he said the only problem with the story is that Ireland didn't have snakes way back then. So that and it's just kind of a fluke of, you know, the development of Ireland, breaking away from the continent of Europe, you know, as an island. So there were actually no snakes there when he was around. So it's probably more metaphorical, you know, that he drove evildoers or drove, you know, the forces of evil from Ireland. But in terms of actually driving the snakes out, it probably was not possible.
Myth number 5 in your article, it's posted as number 4 on the graphic we have, as I don't know if we drove the misnumerization of this, but this is the one. The annual St. Patrick's Day parade is an Irish tradition.
Right. Well, it sort of depends on what you consider to be the tradition, but the parade itself is actually made in America, made in Manhattan, of all places. And this is really one of the most important things when you consider almost any holiday. You know, the way we celebrate Christmas in America today is very different than 50, 100, 500 years ago. And the same thing is true of St. Patrick's Day. The parade was started by Irish immigrants and also Irish soldiers who were part of the British Army in colonial New York. And it began as just a small sort of procession more than a parade, you know, basically going between houses on a day of celebration. And then eventually after the Revolutionary War, really became kind of a permanent event, got bigger and bigger, so that's why New York lays claim to having the oldest and largest parade. But if you had gone to Ireland as late as the 1980s, really not that long ago, you would not have seen St. Patrick's Day parades. Everything actually was closed, including all the pubs.
Wow.
Until recently.
Number 6 on the list, perhaps mentioning New York City, it's appropriate to bring it up. The Irish invented the urban political machine.
Right, that's also a myth. They come to dominate it. So when you think about one of the things the Irish are famous for in America, certainly politics and bosses of political machines like James Michael Curley in Boston and the Tammany Hall machine in New York City. But the inventors or the creators of the idea of a political machine, basically a tight-knit, powerful political organization, were all non-Irish people like Martin Van Buren and other early American figures in the early 1800s. And then the Irish came along in great numbers in the mid-19th century and quickly sort of seized hold of these political machines, and they became sort of the most famous people associated with them, but they weren't the actual ones who invented them.
And in response to Martin Van Buren, we have to say okay for old Kinderhook. I guess more of a
right.
Welsh phrase back then instead of involving the Irish. One other myth out there, number 7, a number of biblical perfection, but it says the myth most Irish Americans are Catholic. Not so, huh?
Right. Well, and that's not so. And that was a real shocker when there were studies done in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that had surveyed people of Irish ancestry in America. And most Americans, when they think Irish, they tend to associate it with the Catholic Irish because there are clearly millions of them. But it turns out that the majority of people who consider themselves at least partially Irish in America are actually Protestant. And the reason for that, if you look at it a little bit closely, is pretty simple, that during the colonial period, huge numbers of Protestant Irish came. So they actually been here many, many more generations before the mid-1800s when the large numbers of Catholic Irish began to arrive. So basically the Protestant Irish got a head start in terms of generations and procreation.
I think about the settlement of my native North Carolina, and they always say the bulk of the settlers, Revolutionary times, Scots, Irish, and so it bears out what you're saying. Anything? Well, I know what I have to get personal with you, Professor. How are you going to celebrate St. Patty's Day?
Well, I'm going to be grading papers like any good professor, but when I get home, I'll probably have the traditional St. Patrick's Day dinner, corned beef and cabbage and a glass of Guinness, and might cue up some of my Irish music, but nothing extravagant on my end. I mean, I enjoy a party as much as anybody else, but one of my daughters headed off to the Boston St. Patrick's Day parade yesterday, and all decked out in green. She's in college and looking to have a good time. And I said, don't forget that 78% of what you see today will have nothing to do with being Irish.
That's true.
It's basically, a holiday that is dominated by, by commercial interests. When you see that Coors, which the last time I checked was a German origin beer, Coors has a sign over the highway where I drove to work today saying, "Kiss me, I'm brushing."
Yeah.
And,
corporate
Budweiser,
interest certainly enjoy as well. Professor, we got to run right now and get to a break. We want to thank you very much for giving us the inside scoop on St. Patty's Day. St. Patrick's Day is kind of an amateur hour for all those drinkers out there. Stay safe. Do not drink and drive, we should say, of course. Reach us on social media at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum, or on Facebook, facebook.com/NewsmaxTV.